Babette, do you want children?
In the current world that we live in, no.
Okay, interesting.
What? Why do you ask?
Okay. I'm just saying because our guest today is like a queer parent, and I just really loved getting to talk to them about like all the like specifics, like what does your kid call you? Are you Mappa? Or you know what I mean? There's like whenever I hear someone say like my nibbling, and it's like the gender neutral niece or nephew, I'm like, some words really fit, some don't necessarily for me, but yeah, it just feels like parenthood.
Well, I mean, I do have a son.
Oh, right.
I do have
gosh.
a son.
Of course.
My son Baxter, my little dog.
Yeah, your sweet little Baxter. Yeah, so I guess I meant, do you want more children? Yeah. I'm a parent.
Exactly. I mean, it's really so tough because like I love following like queer, like Black parents on like Instagram and stuff. Like it's so amazing to see. And I'm like, oh my God, yesterday, this little kid was doing such an amazing job petting my dog Baxter, my son Baxter.
Yeah, your son.
And it was so fucking cute. He was giving him like love pats. And I was like, you're doing such a good job. Like, good job petting him. I actually like think kids are amazing. It just sucks that we live in a fucking hellscape where like I don't really think it's ethical to have kids. Yeah. But they're so fucking cute. And like this little Black boy was just like doing such a good job petting Baxter. I want to be around kids.
I'm like, you can be a parent and not birth children. You could adopt.
Yeah, but I also think adoption is kind of inherently unethical too.
What? Wait, why?
I think too much. Because I think, this is like me being really heady, but in many situations, the continuance of people adopting kids creates a market for it, and that puts pressure on especially like young single women of color to give up their kids when like what they actually need is like the resources to raise their kids. I'm like being so heady.
No, but yeah, I do think you were like, I think too much. So I do think experientially you will make a huge impact. It's like, do we dismantle the systems while not like helping people who are in like free fall after getting fucked by them? Or do we kind of try to do both at the same time? Like, do we adopt and also try to change the adoption system?
Totally. I guess I'm curious what adoption looks like when everybody has what they need.
Yeah, totally.
Am I even queer?
I think I want to take testosterone. I mean, I'm wearing men's underwear right now.
Is that a boy? Is that a girl?
Man, woman, cisgender, transgender, like we're born into language.
Butch, femme, T-girl.
Decolonized.
Queer, trans, BIPOC.
Neurodivergent.
Cisgender, heteropatriarchal, capitalist, girl boss.
Queer femme, lipstick every day.
T for T, like fag boy relationship.
Butch.
Boyish, like sprightly.
The softer, more fey.
Oh, but you're so feminine. You're so feminine.
Attraction to a hot T-boy.
I used sexuality to try to understand my gender.
What does it look like for non-binary people to quote-unquote transition?
I was a boy. If I was looking down at the memory, I was a boy.
It's really difficult to look at gender identity head on.
Wait, I think I'm trans.
Well, our guest today is Asher Pandjiris, who is a non-binary therapist and had a lot to say about their experience being a parent outside of the gender binary. And we also get into talking about eating disorders, specifically among masc-presenting people, when it seems like a lot of the language around ED is about like feminization and, I don't know, trying to be like on the cover of Elle magazine, or I don't know. It just felt like that kind of stuff never really worked for me, and they had a lot to say about that. So just as a disclaimer, there is some talk about eating disorders. We don't get into specifics, but those timestamps are in the show notes. In researching and listening to like a bunch of different podcasts, I love yours. Yours is so amazing. And
thank you.
Yeah. And I really love the nurturing quality that you bring to it as a host. And I would assume that some of that is partly from like your background as a therapist, and then you just said you studied social work. So I'm just obsessed with all of this. So I guess just to start at the very beginning, after that long preamble, what does like masculinity mean to you personally?
I think it's changed a lot over time in the sense that I think I've developed maybe more language for it. I've been really excited about the broadening of the way that you can now identify. My daughter had this project, her own self-initiated project, where she was like going around to all of our queer friends who are mostly in their 40s, some in their 50s, some late 30s, people who've been out for a long time, queer people who are pretty secure in gender expression, whatever. And she gave them this like sexuality quiz that sort of she made up and sort of, I don't know, sort of was informed by something she was learning about. She's basically learning with all of her friends about terms that I've never heard of. I sound like a really old person, obviously like a parent. Just terms around like, if you like these kind of masculine folks, then that means you're this kind of,
Yes.
Omnisexual, and I mean there are a lot of them.
There's demi. I'm in your boat for sure.
Yeah, the demisexual. So it was really interesting because it was kind of like she was telling all of these people like who they were. She's been around them her whole life, so she kind of like gets it on a cellular level. But she was also like, "This is actually who you are. I just want you to know that." And we all loved it because it was new information, but I think there's something about that experience, and of course, like working with my patients and some of whom are younger. And I think there's just so much more language and discourse around what is possible to articulate maybe about my relationship to something like masculinity. I think if you would have talked to me 10 years ago, I probably would have said, well, I don't know if I identify, I feel like a failure when it comes to masculinity, right? Like that period and full stop. That's it.
Oh my
like,
God, yeah.
That's, my life.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I guess I think that there are a lot of associations I have to that. I guess one of which is just that when I was younger and coming out, which I kind of didn't do, was a whole other story. I was raised very religious, and so I didn't really even know what was happening until I left home.
Kind of religious? Are we talking electric guitar Christianity, or are we talking like
Roman Catholicism,
Ooh.
Multiple generations?
Wow.
Gender segregated school throughout my childhood.
Oh, definitely.
Kind of never, really honestly, never interacted with people that weren't, I was like in a Catholic bubble in Missouri. Yeah. So I just didn't know anything else. But when I did start to come out, I knew a lot that was not right, not going right. Mm-hmm. But I definitely didn't have a lot of language for it. But I moved to San Francisco, to the Bay Area in the early 2000s. And my strongest association of this is connected to the failure piece, was just arriving there and everyone around me seeming to like exalt in this idea of like queerness, and it was so radical and amazing, and yet it was completely dichotomized as butch femme. Like it was like extreme butch, extreme
top
femme.
Bottom. Yeah. Yes,
it was
definitely
unbelievable. I'd never seen anything like it, and I was kind of like, am I even queer? Like I don't even understand this. Nobody is even noticing me. I don't exist, like, because I didn't really fully exist on that
illegible
continuum. Yeah, totally. It was only when I like kind of met some faggy trans boys and this people that were existing in a more nuanced way. Yeah, more nuanced, I guess, in some ways. More resonant to my experience, that I was like, I do exist, but I still don't quite understand this. So I guess that's a long way of saying I do have a relationship to masculinity. I'm still understanding it. And I think it's always going to be sort of complicated. And some days I do feel that sort of sense of failure
That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
When you say masculinity failure, do you feel like a femininity success?
No.
Okay.
I feel like a failure just across.
Yeah, me as well. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah,
I
it's just
think
like no category. Like I don't.
zero. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
I
win
think-
anywhere.
Yeah. In the early part of your life, did you feel that? I think definitely in my, like all through grade school, middle school, high school,
Yes.
I think feminine failure is like the way that I would categorize that, like a consistent
Yeah.
feminine failure
Failure
with everyone.
Yeah, felt like drag or something.
Yeah. What? Oh, definitely. Absolute drag, and then almost like a sci-fi movie or something. Like the spaces that I was allowed to be in, I feel like just like sleepovers or locker rooms. I'm just, this is way too much for me. I think that's probably a sexuality component, but yes, that's really interesting to me, going from coming out and moving to kind of like the gay mecca, and then also feeling like not quite a fit there. What do you, I guess now, if someone that you like sees a part of you as masculine, what does that look like, or what are those parts?
Yeah. Well, it feels really good. And that kind of clues me in to the fact that it's exciting and resonates. I think a lot of folks that I work with, a lot of patients and people that I encounter often are like, how do I know really who I am, what, and I'm just like, where it feels good. And I think the question you're asking really is the nice one. It's like, yeah, what feels good when people notice things? I'm tempted to say I really feel strongly that it's when people notice the things that I am not. It's sort of like a funny experience of disidentification with femininity, or the biggest example, I guess, that comes to mind is I was pregnant with my child. I chose to do that. That was a real,
Wow,
very dysphoric kind of experience. And it wasn't, all sorts of bodies have been having babies forever, but I didn't know anyone else really who was kind of doing things that way and wasn't like sort of embracing the maternal femininity part of it.
Yes.
So it was extremely dysphoric experience for me. But I think that there were ways that my partner at the time and other people in my orbit were like, it's still you. They could still sort of see the essence of me, but like, funny that your body is changing in all these ways. It's like weird and kind of like, what the fuck? But, I still felt like kind of the essence of my, like, I don't know, tomboyish. Like, I think mostly just like have gone through a bunch of different iterations. Probably when I was younger, it was like being an athlete, wearing umbros, and like that's the only way that I felt like at all comfortable as like a gendered person. And then in college, I know the way that like I really aspired, the masculinity like manifestation I aspired to is like a crusty punk wearing all black and Carhartts, like activist dude.
Yes.
That was like kind of me essentially, but I couldn't quite get there. But that was sort of like, and I guess there have been different like iterations of my identification with masculinity aesthetically and whatever. But I also think that when you asked me a question about my podcast and like told me that I'm very nurturing or warm, that's a huge part of who I am.
Yeah.
And that isn't disconnected maybe from notions of masculinity, but it is pretty typically not considered in the, I guess my mind goes back to like the like butch femme dynamics that I was witnessing in the Bay Area in the early 2000s, where it was like everyone felt like they had to, and I understand this, but like really felt like they had to perform their gender category hard, like really, really perform it. And so it was like all kinds of like nasty, like the masculine butch sort of energy. It just didn't resonate for me. I think that the softness and the like emotional sensitivity part of me, it's maybe made it more confusing to kind of figure out my my gender expression, I guess.
Yes. I mean, wouldn't it have been so nice if that fit? I feel like I had a similar feeling where I'm hanging out with more mask lesbians and it's very like shots of whiskey or almost it kind of feels like cosplay or something. And then sometimes you can get into kind of a dark area of like womanizing or I don't know, some kind of like the underbelly of toxic masculinity.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
And even when that's not present, it still feels like it doesn't quite fit. Like there is something softer about me, or it's that combo. Did you ever read the graphic novel Pregnant Butch?
Yes, I did, but not not like during. I wish I had that, you know. But yes, totally. It's really
it really made me think of AK Summers. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. That's really cool. I am on testosterone, but that was the big holdout for me is I was like, should I wait and carry a child? Because I would love to experience that. And it's not too late, but that was fun to talk to my therapist. And she very gently like walked me through. She's like, so are you close? Like, how long are you going to like put off this to think that you might like have a baby or something? But that seems like a very cool thing to navigate and find your own equilibrium because birth world is so like butterfly and beautiful and
yeah. And frankly, I mean, so is the parenting world is pretty, you know, in some ways it's ongoing, you know, there's certainly tons of all sorts of parents and I love that and it's great. And I feel less and less every day like I have to perform something.
Yeah.
But there is a kind of, you know, like for the most part, my kid, she's gone to school in Brooklyn and in Northampton, Massachusetts. These are places that are very gay. And yet there's still, it's mostly cis couples with kids. And so there's a lot of expectations around gender assumptions that people make about me.
Wow. Yeah.
Like,
how do you
you're
navigate
the mom.
that?
You're the mom,
yeah.
right? Like because my child's other parent is more masculine presenting. And so it's like, oh, you're the mom. So
you're the wife.
Yeah, you had the baby. So, okay. All right, cool. Interesting.
Yeah.
So their pronoun assumptions and all that stuff. I do feel like those are little areas where I get a little lost and don't feel like I'm really seen. I think the cool part about that, though, is that having grown up with non-binary and trans parents, my kid she reflects back a deep knowing of us. And so she kind of like chuckles or gives me a look when like we're out in the world and people are like, oh, this is your mommy, you know? And she's like, okay, yeah. That's right. You know, so
wait, I love that so much. That's blowing my mind.
Yeah. I mean, kids are amazing these days. They understand a lot.
Yeah. How do you navigate words like mommy, daddy, or like what do your kids call you? How do you introduce yourself to teachers or?
Yeah, I have been okay with being called mom. I use they, them pronouns. I mostly feel okay about that because my kid has been using that for a long time. It wasn't that long ago that I went from fine, you can call me she, but I prefer they. But
do you mean the liminal space where you're kind of like she, they, don't worry, I'm chill.
I'm totally
to like,
cool with whatever.
This feels horrible.
Right, but every time you say she, I fucking hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I more publicly switched and, you know, talked to my patients about it and talked to people in my life that are important to me, you know, there was a question, like that was like her first question was, do you want me to still call you mom? Like, I don't have to, I can call you whatever. And I was like, I don't know. To me, it doesn't feel very gendered. It is gendered, but like, it doesn't feel dissonant because I feel like my kid sees me.
Wow. I really love that my kid sees me part. That's really beautiful. And that's such a fun, like team moment of being able to kind of like navigate the world and you're both just like, oh yeah, this is crazy.
Yeah, totally.
Were you like a tomboy growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was pretty, I talk about this probably at length at times on my podcast. So, but I was really disconnected from my sense of self and my body growing up, for sure. And many queer people are, and many queer religious people are, and trauma
Definitely,
and whatever, all the things, right? So I was an athlete. I was pretty good at playing sports. So I guess I was kind of a jock in a lot of ways, but I still was like forced into wearing really feminine clothes to school. And like, I didn't have a lot of choice. So, it's hard to know what my deal was. I know I felt envious a bit. I have a younger brother and felt envious of what he could do and play and whatever. And probably if I really felt like it, I could have pushed the envelope more. But I think I felt a lot of pressure to be performing a certain role. And I did have a role as sort of more of a caretaker or like maternal figure to my brother. So that kind of compounded a lagging development of, I think, a sense of myself, separate.
Totally. Kind of covering the bases for other people's existence. And you don't really have time to be like, well, what do I want?
Yeah.
That's a luxury. Yeah, definitely.
And now, like, of course, that's pretty much my job, is like being a person who helps other people figure out who they are and what they, like what their preferences are and what they really care about and how to make sense of their experience. That's my job as a psychotherapist. So it just comes from a real place.
Yeah, definitely. Like a lot of practice, a lifetime of practice.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed a lot of people? I just feel like COVID has been such a time of us sitting in our bodies, and we're outside of the kind of like pre-COVID, like I would go to work and I would go to 3 other things after work every day. Like my life was just like thing to thing to thing. Yeah. And now it's crazy if I do one thing in the day. So I just think we've all had time to sit and be like, is this working? Have you been noticing that on like the therapy side of things? Like a lot of people are kind of having their reckoning with their bodies or themselves.
Yeah. I think it's very confronting, and sometimes confronting and like illuminating, okay, these are the things I want to change or shift in my life. But, I work with a lot of trans and non-binary folks. I work with a lot of people who are either in recovery or still active with their eating disorders or disordered eating and other things. And a lot of people who've experienced trauma and have all sorts of coping skills, some of which they can't fully access right now. So yeah, it's been a very confronting time for folks, and sometimes, again, clarifying, but often I think the other side of it is kind of almost a tighter grip on the things that you can control, like disordered eating or
food,
exercise, substance relapses and things like that have been really understandably happening for folks, because I think it's really hard to so profoundly sit with yourself and your body and your bodily experience and your bodily vulnerability. Apparently we're not so vulnerable anymore, but we're pretty vulnerable. We like with this virus. And I think that's part of it too, is just like a real confrontation with the body. Absolutely.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. You saying that it's been very clarifying for people, I think that's really interesting. And like you were saying, not always in like a fun way, sometimes in a very jarring, this might ruin everything, but I'm seeing it as a truth.
Totally.
What do you talk to people about when they're coming up with these feelings of, I might be trans, but I'm not quite sure what to do, where to go from here?
I think initially people often seek me out, either in part because I say that I'm queer, non-binary, that I work with queer, trans, non-binary folks. And sometimes that's what gets people in the door to working with me. And then it's sort of like, I don't want to talk about it. It's really hard to talk about like the materiality of transitioning or considering transitioning. I mean, sometimes there's an imminent medical procedure or like a desire to have some kind of gender affirming surgeries or care that either is happening or not happening. We talk about that. And those conversations can be really, I'm glad to be a provider who is not pathologizing of anyone's desire to really access those. I'm not one of the therapists who's like, let's talk for 8 months about why you might want to do this.
Oh my God.
Like the
Yeah.
gatekeeping model. I don't do that, but I do talk about it with people. So we talk about maybe that stuff. I think what mostly I work with is people who have a lot of barriers in their life or coping strategies in their life that have worked in the past or work less now, but keep them dissociated from some of the feelings around their transness or non-binary identity. So it's often sort of an indirect route to talking about the concrete identification, but more like, let's figure out like what orthorexia, how it's functioning in your life, like the excessive exercise and like control of food. How is that functioning? If we start to like temper that behavior, what comes up for you? And it's like all sorts of things about what I don't want to happen to my body. What do you not want to happen to your body? Well, I don't want to be seen as feminine, or I do want to be seen as feminine. So there's it really is hard to, in a therapeutic setting, I think for a lot of people, especially if you've had invalidating experiences as a child, if you have a family system where there was a lot of attachment trauma, it's really difficult to kind of look at gender identity head on. I think a lot of people are I'm going to go to my therapist and like talk about whether or not I'm trans. And it's like,
yes or no.
Yeah, yes or no. It usually is like multiple years of exploring the different dimensions of that.
Wow. Yeah. I definitely feel that experientially.
You can relate to that.
I really went into therapy being kind of like yes or no, and then I can get out of here. And then it was just kind of like, now we're talking about ADHD for 4 years. You know,
totally.
Yeah. A lot of these layers that then you peel back and you get to a new plateau of thinking about your gender and having the space to do that because you've peeled away these kind of like mechanisms that kept you from having to look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's the whole issue of like living as or experimenting with living in a particular body that maybe is more aligned with what you ideally wanted. And then that's cool. But then there's, oh shit, now I'm dating someone and they're looking at my body and that's a whole other, you know what I mean? So there's there's always something to talk about. There's always something really hard about bodies, dealing with bodies.
Definitely.
The reality of that.
Yeah. Do you think that when it comes to disordered eating, do you feel like that is talked about enough in queer spaces? Do you feel like it's a queer issue? Yeah.
It's not talked about enough at all. It is 100% a queer issue. It's certainly a trans, non-binary, kind of issue. I would say it's not talked about at all enough. There are people that are like really trying to, and a lot of them are people who have lived experience, are trying to really push that and like transform treatment facilities and settings. I used to run a treatment facility for eating disorders in New York, and it was so stuck in a model of femininity. The association with any form of disordered eating was like attributed to femininity. And in my experience, it's certainly that, but it is much less talked about and discussed explicitly as disordered eating in trans and non-binary communities. And it's sort of like, this is how I'm getting by. Like, and I respect that. I can't access hormones. I don't want anyone to know. So this is what I'm doing to my body, essentially.
Yeah.
I'm managing disordered eating. And I've done a decent amount of presenting at conferences and writing about that to try to address, I guess, the different way to expand the discourse so that people who don't self-identify as having an eating disorder can still be helped or served or understood as struggling find care, struggling with, and that's why I often use the word nourishment, barriers to nourishment. What is getting in the way of you nourishing your body, and can you be nourished and also tolerate how that impacts the way you're perceived gender-wise? I think it's finding new ways to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely.
It's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I would go to like Overeaters Anonymous. I also I'm coming from like a disordered eating background, and it would be all women. It would be like one man and all women. It was extremely like diet culture, 17 magazine. And I just was kind of like, this isn't what I'm up to. Like, I'm actually not trying to fit into the perfect dress.
Right.
Something much more complicated is going on here.
Right.
You actually have is it like a 9-week cohort? Do you have something coming up specifically about this barriers to nourishment?
Yeah, I do 2 things with the Living in This Queer Body podcast, like associated with that. I run groups that are kind of sort of like group therapy. But yeah, for around this idea of barriers to nourishment. And it's typically very much for folks who are gender nonconforming or have a complicated relationship to gender and who are queer. That's kind of happens periodically, and it's always listed on my website or on my Instagram. But I also started this therapist collective with a friend of mine who's a friend and colleague, also a therapist. And we're going to be essentially training therapists to work hopefully more skillfully around some of these issues, or people who are invested in that. So queer, trans, BIPOC folks who are mental health providers who want to be able to talk and explore embodiment with people who have really traumatic and painful and complicated experiences with their bodies.
Wow. Yeah, that is very cool. I was looking at that. And that is specifically for therapists.
It's for therapists and mental health providers. And it's a year-long program called the Kintsugi Therapist Collective.
Very cool. As people who are identifying as non-binary, do you feel the pull of kind of both beauty standards? Perfectly puzzle piecing together into one nightmare? How do you feel when navigating like your own attractiveness, or how you feel euphoria?
It's a good question. Bear in mind, you're asking us to a former Catholic who essentially was taught to never celebrate the self and to make yourself very, I don't know. I have several old friends who I've known forever who are basically like, you never know when people have crushes on you. You have no idea, because all you do, you have blinders, like you cannot see anything about yourself because you're just like, so not me. Oh no, it couldn't possibly be. It's like so deeply ingrained.
Yes.
Can you relate to that?
1000%. Yes. I just feel so best friend energy.
Yeah.
Like Disney Channel original movie. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So I've been aware of this for a while. So I've been working on it.
Cool.
Been working on being myself and being in myself. I don't know. I'm reminded of this activist group called Gay Shame that was really active in the early 2000s in the Bay Area and some other places, but in the Bay Area. And they were actually people that I was like, oh, this is interesting. And it was essentially like I'm not going to do it justice. So I'll just want to say that. But it's essentially was like a movement of people who are like, could we stop celebrating Budweiser and the Pride floats and all of this stuff? And they would do these like actions where they would get on like a San Francisco bus, and it was just like leaning into like almost like the absurdity or grotesqueness of potentially being queer, like having a queer body, like a weird body, like a gross body, a strange body. And it was so theatrical and so performative, and I loved it. And I think about that sometimes. I wouldn't say that's my gender, but I do think along those lines sometimes when I catch myself feeling pulled to kind of button it up, especially as like a psychotherapist who has like a real serious job and stuff. And I have tattoos. I have tattoos on my hands. I really do feel the pull sometimes to kind of organize myself into an acceptable category. And I do that. Sometimes I like fall into that, or I find ways to do that. But I do really like this ethos of almost like celebrating gender failure and finding my own pleasure in being able to feel comfortable in my body as imperfectly gendered as it is. Do I love every single part of my body? Like, absolutely not. But do I nourish my body and accept it and kind of try to enjoy it? Yeah, I do.
That was such a sweet and encouraging interview.
Ugh, yeah, it was so good. They sound like such a great therapist.
I know.
For real. No.
Are they available?
Seriously.
Right? Wait, okay, Ira, you still owe us a story about your not so great therapist.
Oh, yeah.
I do.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, spill it.
So a couple weeks ago, we talked to my friend Amy, who I met in a support group for trans folks, which was actually started by my individual therapist at the time. And I wanted to share part of our interview with Amy where we talked about a really strange and sort of scary experience we had with this therapist. But first, I need to define a term we're going to be using, which is gender exploratory therapy. So this is a new kind of quote unquote therapy that a lot of folks are calling actually a new form of conversion therapy. And essentially therapists who use this method try to attract folks who are questioning their gender, and especially parents of kids and teens who are maybe questioning their gender, saying they're providing another method through which to explore this uncertainty surrounding gender identity. Which sounds like a good thing initially, but the truth is that being trans is never the end goal with these therapists. So they use gaslighting and delay tactics to prevent folks, especially younger people, from accessing gender-affirming care and medical intervention. We've included a link to a really great read on all of this in the show notes, so you can go learn more if you'd like. But here's Amy and I from a couple of weeks ago talking about our experience.
So our therapist, we met as a trans woman, and he would then detransition and essentially, as far as I'm concerned, become an anti-trans activist.
Yeah.
And I don't think that he would frame it that way, but that is absolutely what happened. Because within a month, I would say, or 2 months of him detransitioning, he ended the group. But then a few months later, with a little Googling, he was popping up on these websites of organizations that ostensibly purported themselves as to providing a quote unquote more reasonable approach to diagnosing dysphoria and treating it. In reality, if you even go to these groups and go 1 or 2 Twitter levels away, you have mask off fascists.
Yes.
So his name was on this open letter that was signed, essentially saying that young people haven't formed their brains completely and they're not ready to do this and they're not ready to do that, and we have to be careful. But if you follow any of these organizations up to the top level, they're all run by the same boomer English turf lady.
Yeah.
All of them are this one person who runs all of it.
But it was like such a shock. I mean, so that when he ended the group, his reasoning for it was, as I detransition, all of the stuff we talk about here is sort of too close to home. And I'm having trouble separating my work from my personal bias about it. And I was like, fair enough.
Yeah, very fair.
Because he was, and it was becoming apparent to us, you know, his feelings were seeping into things he was saying to us in session. And I happened to be in individual therapy with him at the time. And it was definitely apparent in our individual sessions. None of us, of course, have any problem with anyone detransitioning. That is not the thing at all.
Just as valid as anything.
Because we've also morphed and changed over time. Like, of course, we understand, like, someone would change their mind about how they present or the way they experience gender. Sure. But it's when you take that extra step of, because this and this certain thing happened to me, I don't think this is safe for anyone.
Yeah. And with a little sleuthing, there isn't a very good framework or support network for detransitioners.
Yeah.
And I think that it made our therapist vulnerable to influence from these groups that are specifically seeking out detransitioners as somebody to be a mouthpiece, because it legitimizes them to have somebody say, well, I was trans and now I'm not. If they can use recent detransitioners, it gives them a lot more clout to people who are observing it from an outside perspective and don't really know anything about this.
Which is why the Fox Newses of the world will have people on that have detransitioned who are saying these type of things about trans people from a personal point of bias. If we were giving equal airtime, if we were listening to everyone equally, these people would be having current identified trans people on these shows and whatever as well. And these websites, if they were providing a fair analysis of all perspectives, they would have trans people as part of the conversation.
Exactly.
Which is the biggest red flag of all, you know?
Right. Yeah. The warning that I feel like we can really give in talking about this is to watch out for this very specific phrase, gender exploratory therapy. Because if you just take those words in, sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
We'd all love to explore our gender in therapy, right? But it is actually positioning itself against gender affirming therapy, which is the type of therapy that we are all seeking.
This is kind of wild. So I'm doing like more like research about it, or just like looking, and it seems like there's been like more coverage on gender exploratory therapy this year. And it just feels very scary because it feels like a tactic in this wave of like anti-trans legislation. I mean, yes, like you have this individual experience that happened that was really wild, but it also feels like it's part of this greater strategy to like delay trans people from getting care, which is wild. Like I didn't realize it was that, because it's especially like targeted towards like young people, like youth, and they're like,
and their parents. Yeah.
That's wild. So like your therapist is just like one of many, and they won him over, I guess, which is nuts.
I mean, that's the scary part about it. My therapist and all these folks on all these websites are arguing like, no, we're just trying to open up the conversation. We're not saying that trans people don't exist, trans people shouldn't exist or shouldn't be allowed to have care, but they're like, in the way that they describe their beliefs on these sites, it's very clear that that's not the case, and be like, they're putting all these stipulations on how they think people should be able to get care. Like, I remember my therapist telling me, I'm really not sure that anyone under 25 should be able to get surgeries or hormones or anything. Like, just the brain's not fully developed argument, which is just nuts to me.
Yeah. And your point of if they really believed that some people should transition, then they would have those trans people on their staff. But then you look and you're like, no, it's all people who are either cis or detransitioned. So it's like, what are you talking about? I think it's important when you reach out to a therapist to know what you're looking for, and to even in that email write in explicit terms like, these are things that are important to me. I have friends who are in poly relationships and they need to explicitly look for therapists that aren't going to be like, maybe this poly thing isn't worth it, you know? Like,
Well, this is what really scares me. This is what is really scary about the exploratory gender thing, because it kind of borrows some language from like psychodynamic style of therapy, which is that like you can kind of get to the root of everything. Like there's something behind everything. Like that idea itself is not inherently evil, but the way that they're spinning it is so evil and anti-trans. And so I'm like, wait, that's really scary.
Well, they clearly have a cause. Like, we have a thesis. It's that trans people don't exist. And we're also smart enough to kind of
but the way they're going, exactly. Like, they're not just a bunch of idiots, I guess is what I feel like. Like, I'm just like...
It's so great that Asher has this program, Kintsugi Therapist Collective, too, where they're training new therapists to do what they do. That gives me some hope that maybe in the future it'll be easier to find great care-focused therapists who are really there to help you and not to gaslight you and all of this other stuff. Maybe making therapy in general more accessible for queer and trans folks.
Yeah. Totally. They're doing amazing work there.
Also, this conversation is making me think about, because it's so hard to find a therapist, at least in my experience, you know, I've just tended to like take whatever I can get. And it's making me really think more about what would my like most ideal and like gender affirming therapists look like.
Yeah, totally.
Gender Spiral is an original podcast from Audiation. This episode was mixed by Matt Noble, and music is composed by Chanel Critchlow, with art by Joey Hahn and graphics by Honey Hodges. This show is executive produced by Ireland Meacham, myself, Babette Thomas, my co-host Allie Beardsley, and Sandy Smullins, with additional story editing from me.
Thank you so much to our guest, Asher Pandjiris. You can check out their podcast, Living in This Queer Body, and we've also linked their Instagram and website in the show notes. If you like the show, please head over to patreon.com/genderspiralpodcast to support us for $2 a month, or subscribe to a higher tier for bonus content, special monthly postcards, and even free tote bags.
You can also check us out at genderspiralpod.com, where you'll find a link to leave us a voicemail to ask us questions, tell us who you want to hear from, and what you want to hear about on the show. And follow us on Instagram. It's at Gender Spiral. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast to stay tuned. We're releasing a brand new episode every single week this summer.
Tune in next week to Gender Spiral,
where you never have to spiral alone.